the programming part next. In our JDBC programs, we need to do these standard steps. So let me go through them one by one. The first step, load the driver. Load the driver, okay? Only one line you need to use, this line. Class dot fullname, then a string parameter that corresponds to your driver's class name. The driver's class name. So remember our first interface, the driver's interface. Okay? So, but there is some class needs to implement this interface. Okay? Yeah. So we need to load it. Yeah. Here, this line, you can see. What's the meaning, this line? Class, capital class. This is Java's capital class. It is a Java class. Okay? The class name is called a class. Okay? Yeah. Java's class. Okay? All right. Remember, there is another similar one, capital object. In Java, there is a capital object class, also a class. But here, this is a capital class. Okay? Yeah. So using this class, you can do a lot of things related to the Java classes, Java class object. Java class object. Java class itself has some object, class type object. So so different from object type object. So class type object. Each class has one class type object, only one. Okay? Not like object. Object can have multiple instances, right? Yeah. So class, each class you can only have one object. Okay, one. Yeah. All right. So here we use this class dot fullname to load our driver dynamically. Dynamic class loading. So this line means the dynamic class loading. Because in your program, anywhere you can load some class. Okay? Anywhere you can load, if you know the class name, you can load it. Okay? You can load it anywhere. So that's why it is called dynamic class loading. Okay? Dynamic class loading. All right. But next, there is another question. Dynamic class loading, so you specify the full path class name. So that's the full path class name. But the question is, how does the JVM find it? JVM, Java Virtual Machine. How does JVM, Java Virtual Machine, find it? Here, there is a concept called class loading concept. Class loading concept. Yeah. So you need to put the classes you may need to use for your web applications in certain locations. Then the JVM can find them. If you do not place them in those locations, JVM cannot find them. So that's the class loading concept. Here, let me give you those locations. There are 3 locations. JVM will go there to search for your Java class. The first, remember the bracket, your web app bracket / web-inf lib. Yeah. We saw this before. Okay. The second location, remember the server Tomcat /lib. If you place there, JVM can go there and search for it. Yeah. There is a third one. Yeah. JVM will also go there and look up for you. Yeah. Inside your web app, still web-inf. Then there is a folder called classes folder. Okay, yeah. Only these three locations. So all your Java classes in .class format, compiled .class format, or .jar format. Because some of the classes are archived inside the .jar library files. And the JVM will also get into each jar file and search those class files one by one. Okay? So in that way, it can find your driver's class file dynamically. Okay? In this way. Yeah. All right. So that is the class loading concept. Okay? The background of this driver loading step. Yeah. Next step. Now we need to create a connection object. Establish a database connection. So this time. Yeah. These lines, yeah. So we create a connection object. We use driver manager class name, driver manager, dot get connection method. Then you pass the first parameter, database URL, okay? Second, username. Here in MySQL, the default username root. Default. After we install XAMPP, we use the default username password. The password, nothing, okay? Double quotes, nothing, yeah. So that's the MySQL default username password. So you just pass it to this method, get connection method. Then a connection object is created, okay? Yeah, so then you can do the queries. You need to create statement objects to do the queries. Here, typically, yeah, in order to execute SQL statements, we need to create a statement object containing the SQL query statements. Yeah. So here, yeah. Java statements. Okay, statements, object. So we need to do queries. So we use this. All right. Then in SQL, we have SQL statements. So it's a string, right? Yeah, command, SQL command. So we also call SQL statements. So when we say statement, be careful to separate the meaning of these two. So they are different, okay? So Java statements doing SQL queries, so that's one type, but sometimes also talk about SQL statements. That's SQL commands. SQL commands, okay? Yeah, all right. Here the example, so we declare Java, yeah, I mean, so that's the location, the package, right? Java.sql. Yeah. If you import that package, so then you just use the statement. Statement, STMT, yeah. If you do not know the query at the beginning, so you just use that null. If you know the query, your SQL query statement, so you can do it directly, okay? So you can just replace the not null by that whole right-hand side thing, okay? But if you need to do it later, you need to separate, right? At the beginning, you declare this object, but you need to wait for some more information. So that's possible. Yeah. So sometimes you do not have the complete information. You need to wait. Yeah. So in that case, you separate. Okay, separate. Later, when you get the information you need, then you do the second one. Otherwise, you just do it together. Yeah. If you already get everything, you just do it together. Okay. All right. So here, your query command here. Okay. So then you have the statement object. You can use it to execute the query. Yeah. All right. Next, we discuss the execute query step. All right. For select statement, so there is 4 types. I just told you in the previous slide. 4 types. Select statement. The first type, when you do it, you expect some result return. So you use this line, result set rs equals statement.execute query. Then the result object return to that rs reference. So later you can retrieve data from this rs object. Then for the remaining 3 types, insert, delete, update. So you do those queries and change the data stored in the database, but you do not need anything returned in that situation. You do not need to see anything. Yeah. So the select is the read only, okay? Because you only read data. You do not change the data, read only. These 3, you modify the data, you change the data. So 2 different types. Yeah. In the data change type, you run this command, statement.execute update. Yeah. So you run this command. Right? And you do not need to process return the result. Although in the Java, in the method, if you look at the API documentation, you can see it returns some integer value. Yeah, it tells you some information. Yeah. If you need that, you can use a variable to store the returned integer number, and you can use that information. But most of the time, we don't need that. Okay? We don't need that. We just want the database updated after this command. Yeah. All right. Now, question. Okay? Because these are the basic steps we need to do in our database programming. But the next thing is, we need to ask this question. What to do if some of the values in your queries are unknown? Because in your query statement, in your SQL query statement, at the compile time, so this is unknown, means at the compile time, unknown. When you write the code, at the development time, also at the development time, yeah, because when you write the code, yeah, also you can treat as development time, okay? Development time, okay? You can treat that. You do not know some part of the data. You do not know. Some fields, unknown. At this time. They are known at the runtime. The data are known at the runtime. Because it comes from the user input. User need to give the input. For example, in our animal survey example, I will show you soon. After this slide, I will show a quick demo of the animal survey example. In that example, you ask user to select from a list of options which pet do they have. So they make selection. After they make selection, that piece of data is known at the runtime. Not at development time, not at compile time, but at the runtime. How do you handle the situation like that, right? So this is the legitimate question. The answer is prepared statement. Remember, when we, in the previous slide, when we learned statement and the sub interface, right? Prepared statement. So we use the subclass. This is a subclass of the statement. Sub, right? Prepared statement. So this sub interface can help us handle the unknown parameters at the development time, at compile time. Okay, yeah, so next slide, I will talk about this in much more details. Yeah. All right, now, next one, I want to talk about the programming detail, but I use the animal survey example. So I need to let you know the demo, yeah, the whole story of the example. So then I can talk about that. Otherwise, you cannot imagine the features in that example. All right, so let's get out of this PowerPoint and